The new DJI Pocket 4 and the Action 6 are two very different devices. Still, it might not be easy to choose between them. Both are excellent for vlogging, capturing vacation moments, or simply as a camera for family use and travel. Today, I'd like to show you a few longer comparison clips so you can see the difference in image quality. But before that, I'd like to briefly show you how the two cameras compare in size and what the fundamental differences are. Although the Pocket 4 is called a pocket camera, it is significantly larger and also slightly heavier than the Action 6. But perhaps the biggest difference is that the Pocket 4 uses a gimbal for stabilization, while the Action 6 stabilizes footage purely electronically. Both methods work well, but the gimbal has a few distinct strengths and weaknesses that lead to some of the biggest differences between these two cameras. The gimbal not only stabilizes recordings well in good lighting, but it also provides excellent stabilization in low light conditions. The Action 6 electronic image stabilization, on the other hand, has weaknesses in low light. With a gimbal, you can capture cinematic footage at the optimal shutter speed. And particularly interesting, you can have the camera automatically track you or another subject. You can therefore simply set the Pocket 4 up somewhere, for example mount it on a tripod, and then let it track you. This doesn't work with the Action 6. But the gimbal also has its downsides. In my opinion, the biggest drawback is that it makes the camera fragile. It's obviously not waterproof and should always be properly protected. Even using it at the beach can quickly become a problem if the camera falls into the sand. I learned the hard way that the gimbal is a weak point with my Pocket 3. It fell over along with my tripod and the gimbal was damaged. The camera is now unusable. In contrast, the Action 6 is rugged and waterproof to a depth of 20 meters without an additional housing. This naturally offers significant advantages when using it as a camera for family outings or vacations. But the Pocket 4 has one particular strength, and that is its excellent image quality. So let's take a look at a few longer comparison shots. Both cameras have sensors of similar size. In fact, at 1/1.1 inches, the Action 6 sensor is only slightly smaller than the Pocket 4's sensor, which, just like the Pocket 3's, measures 1 inch. On top of that, the Action 6 sensor is square. This has the interesting advantage that when you shoot in custom mode, you can crop the same footage horizontally or vertically in post. That's cool, useful, and a particular strength of the Action 6. And I've noticed that many people would have liked the Pocket 4 to have a square sensor as well. But the square sensor also has a downside. In the standard video format, meaning 16:9, only a significantly cropped portion of the sensor is used, and a relatively large part of the sensor remains unused. But in my opinion, that isn't the biggest difference between the two cameras when it comes to image quality. The biggest difference by far is that unlike the Action 6, the Pocket 4 does not have a fixed focus. The Pocket 4 features an efficient autofocus system that can focus on subjects even at very close distances. Combined with the relatively wide aperture of f2, this results in a very beautiful and cinematic look. The background becomes blurred and the footage from the Pocket 4 looks very soft and high quality, much like the footage from the Pocket 3. If needed, you can also shoot cinematic B-roll close-ups, and those look excellent too, as you can see here. On the Action 6, the focus is fixed at infinity. This makes sense for an action camera. The result is that everything is in focus and looks sharp. However, this doesn't really allow for truly cinematic shots. And on the topic of sharpness, once you've gotten used to the Pocket 4's footage, the Action 6 footage looks significantly too sharpened and digital. I have to admit, I'd never really noticed that so strongly before. You can further reduce the sharpness on both cameras if you're aiming for a softer, more cinematic look. And of course, there's another very important difference. The Action 6 field of view is significantly wider than that of the Pocket 4. This can be an advantage in some situations, because personally, I find the Pocket 4's field of view a bit too narrow, especially for vlogging. For these shots, I usually used both cameras on a stick. The Action 6 might be well suited for that. The Pocket 4, however, isn't really well suited for use on a stick. If you hold both cameras in your hand, that is, use them at arm's length, the footage looks like this. Sure, a wider field of view naturally leads to more distortion, which isn't ideal for vlogging either. And I understand why they opted for 20mm. For the Pocket 4, there's an ultra-wide lens attachment available as an accessory. You can simply attach it magnetically to the main lens, and it works well. My biggest issue with the ultra-wide lens is that it's very small and extremely easy to lose. I've misplaced it several times and searched for it frantically afterward, but fortunately haven't lost it yet. Both cameras can then record using only a smaller section of the sensor, which enables a 2x digital zoom without significant loss of quality. But only the Action 6 can also shoot in 8K, which allows for a more extensive cropping of the footage in post. That's an additional feature, but not that important to me personally. Shooting in 8K results in huge files, frame rate limitations, and drawbacks in dynamic range and low light performance. As you can see here, the Action 6 also holds its own very well in terms of dynamic range. I would even say that it protects highlights slightly better overall than the Pocket 4. But this isn't due to a superior sensor, but rather because relatively strong HDR processing is applied in the background. Unfortunately, you can't disable this, and that in turn further emphasizes the digital look. Aside from that, I'd say that the Action 6 footage has slightly more saturation and contrast overall. Overall, both cameras produce good and beautiful footage. But if I were to consider image quality alone, I would always prefer the Pocket 4. As I said, it simply produces a significantly higher quality and more cinematic image. Both cameras can also shoot in D-Log and 10-bit. The Action 6 in D-Log M, the Pocket 4 in the even flatter D-Log. This also points to the Pocket 4's more professional intended use. And even though the Action 6 has a sensor that's almost the same size, and just like the Pocket 4 has its own low-light shooting mode, it can't quite keep up in low-light conditions. The Action 6 does have a variable aperture that can be set to as low as f2 in low light, matching the aperture of the Pocket 4. Nevertheless, the Pocket 4's footage has less image noise, significantly more detail and better colors. And as mentioned, the gimbal also offers particular advantages in these lighting conditions. This also holds true when we do a proper stabilization comparison in daylight. This is even a comparison with Rocksteady Plus on the Action 6. The Pocket 4 is better at compensating for particularly strong movements. But, and this needs to be said, the gimbal cannot compensate for up and down movements, such as those that occur while running or walking, quite as well as the highly efficient electronic stabilization of the Action 6. When vlogging, the footage from the Pocket 4 looks significantly more jerky than that from the Action 6. The Action 6's extremely wide field of view is of course an advantage in this context. Although the Pocket 4 isn't an action camera, it has a feature that I hope we'll see in various action cameras this year: recording in 4K at 240 frames per second. This lets you capture some really cool action shots. The maximum frame rate in 4K on the Action 6 is 120 frames per second. In this comparison, you can see that it's a huge difference. To shoot at 240 frames per second on the Action 6, you have to reduce the resolution to 1080, and the result doesn't look good and is barely usable. And the Pocket 4 has another important advantage in this comparison, or perhaps even two important advantages. The Pocket 4 shoots in 4K at 30 frames per second for an incredible 3 hours and 24 minutes. And that's with the standard battery. The Action 6 shoots with the same settings for 2 hours and 27 minutes, which is also good. On top of that, the Pocket 4 has more than 107 GB of internal storage, more than twice as much as the Action 6. With 107 GB, you can actually do without an SD card in most cases. Both cameras have good internal microphones, but the Pocket 4 has received a few new additional audio features. For this recording, I set directional audio to front on the Pocket 4 and enabled vocal boost. Of course, both cameras have the advantage of allowing connection to a DJI microphone without a receiver, resulting in even better audio quality. Apart from that, there are of course a number of other differences between these two cameras, but I think I've shown you the most important differences today in this brief comparison. And you might have gotten the impression that the Pocket 4 is superior in every way, and that I would definitely prefer it. But that's not necessarily the case, because there's one important topic we haven't discussed yet: the price. And here the Action 6 has a decisive advantage. It's significantly cheaper. In the US, the Action 6 costs $436, while the Pocket 4 costs $649, even though the Pocket 4 does not appear to be available in the US at the moment. Here in Europe, the Action 6 costs €380, and the Pocket 4 costs €500. That's a relatively big difference. You'll find links to the best current deals in the description below. So who would I recommend the Pocket 4 to? And who the Action 6? If your priority is image quality and if you're also interested in filmmaking, then definitely go for the Pocket 4. It's also suitable as a camera for a YouTube channel. But if you're looking for a camera for vacations or family use, I'd definitely consider the Action 6. It's simply much smaller, more affordable, and most importantly, not as prone to damage. And one more thing, Insta360 is also set to release the Luna, a pocket camera that will compete directly with the Pocket 4 and apparently come with some interesting additional features. You might want to wait for its release. DJI is also planning a Pro Pocket camera, which is also expected to launch soon. If you'd like to see a detailed comparison between the Pocket 4 and the Pocket 3, check out my in-depth video on the topic. And don't forget to give me a like as feedback if you found the video interesting. That helps me with the algorithm. A detailed tutorial on the Pocket 4 is coming soon. So stay tuned and see you next time.